Chairman, we're live.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Infrastructure and Planning and Growth, Growth, Infrastructure and Planning Scrutiny, part of the IP. There are 22 members, or 22 people present in the people box. Clearly, we're attracting quite a lot of interest, which is lovely. But obviously, I can only ask those of us who are members of this particular panel to contribute. What I'm proposing to do is to ask the executive member to introduce himself and give us a few minutes on the background to his portfolio and any key challenges that he sees or key successes that he sees. Like to keep that very short if we can, Stephen, please, because obviously we've got a limited time, an hour and a half to in real time to go through the questions. The key lines of inquiry have been circulated to all members and approved by all members of this panel, and I believe you will have seen them, so hopefully you'll be in a position to answer them. I have allocated, in the interest of time, the initial opening remarks on each one to a specific member of the panel, but that does not preclude other members of the panel coming in, and it's entirely a matter for you and your team, Stephen, to decide who is best placed to answer the questions. I will not be interfering or directing in that respect, so I'll leave it to you. So over to you, Stephen. Introduce yourself, please, and can I also ask when each of your team members, officers or deputies do speak on to anything, they just initially say who they are and what their role is so that the wider public can understand the situation as well as we do. Thank you very much. Off you go.
Thanks, Richard. I think most of you will know me. I'm Stephen Bolton. I'm the portfolio holder for Growth, Infrastructure and Planning. The Growth, Infrastructure and Planning portfolio encompasses sustainable growth, infrastructure planning and economic issues. It seeks to achieve the corporate ambition for high quality and sustainable growth. It includes the County Council's statutory planning functions and its interaction with district councils on their joint strategic plans, local plans, strategic sites and planning applications. As part of this process, the team also seeks infrastructure contributions for other county council services such as highways, education and libraries. It also has a wider role to work with partners to support socio-economic prosperity. It has an executive member on the Harlow-Gilston Garden Town Joint Committee, the Hemel Garden Communities Board, the Hemel Place Board, the Broxbourne Development Programme Board, as well as the Herts Infrastructure and Planning Partnership and the Innovation Quarter Board. It helps to fulfil part of the council's vision through enabling a cleaner, greener environment, healthy and fulfilling lives to our residents, and sustainable, responsible growth for our county. That's as much as I need to say to start, so welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Right, members, can I just ask you to please introduce yourself initially for the first question? Clearly, once you've done it, we don't need to do it again, but the first question is on recruitment and staff and comes from Terry Heritage. You're mute, Terry, sorry.
Right, sorry, I've got problems with it. Okay, there we are, we're on. Thank you, Stephen. I'm Councillor Teresa Heritage, representing Harpenden South West Ward. My first set of questions, and there are three, are on recruitment and staffing. On page 169, it states that there is additional investment in this portfolio, including 133,000 to see more strategic sites being developed over the next 10 to 15 years. It notes that the current team is too small, which we all know, to cover this list of strategic sites. So I'll break it down into three. How is the portfolio addressing recruitment and retention of staff, given that the current team is too small? For development that will take over the next 10, 15 years, how will the portfolio ensure there is an adequate staffing throughout this period? And then thinking about the risk. On page 171, creating a team of experienced officers is a risk highlighted. How will the portfolio retain, attract and train the experienced officers needed?
Thanks, Teresa. Interesting. I suppose initially I want to say we're a really interesting department, so lots of people come and work with us, but there's a bit more to it than that. So the £133,000 is for 2 strategic planning officers and 2 strategic transport officers. These posts have all now been appointed. This team is for, as you say, the 2 strategic sites, Harlow, Gilston, Garden Town and the Hemel Garden communities. So that is in place at the moment. It is a small team. There are still some vacancies, but we will aim to fill those as we need. We do feel that the team is large enough at the moment for the work that's being carried out at the moment. Of course, as work increases and with the amount of new development that's going to happen over the county in the next few years, that will be a problem. But we're also taking steps on recruitment. We're looking at that county-wide. We're talking to the boroughs and districts about it. And we have an apprentice scheme that's in operation. So things are being addressed. It is difficult. There is not a great, or I should say, a huge number of planners out there. Many of them are attracted to perhaps better pay in the commercial sector rather than local authorities. So there are difficulties with that, but I think we're addressing that at the moment. Colin, you might want to say a bit more about it.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Yes, I think one of the things we're doing at a county council level, but also at a county level, we recognise that planners move between different districts, sometimes into the private sector, sometimes come back again, and I'm guilty of it myself. So we're looking at this as a county-wide effort. So there's a variety of strands to it. Apprenticeships, so making sure we can bring people in at the start of their career, perhaps get some experience with a district, with a county, perhaps some time in the private sector, and treat them as a partner rather than always on the other side of the fence in this regard. We're looking at devising material we can take to careers fairs, and we're starting to go to careers fairs this year to pitch the place sector. I think we're not limiting it to planning, but we're saying there's ecology, archaeology, highways, all sorts of work looking at the place, tackling climate change, those problems that will be on the minds of young people at the moment. Once we hopefully recruit, then it's looking at retaining those people. So how do we develop their career? Can we have a schedule of training events that we host, that the private sector hosts? We send off to the professional bodies we are members of to develop at key points in a career. You're about to deal with a bigger application you've ever dealt with before, or present to committee, or represent your authority at an appeal or an inquiry. So those sort of key training processes. We had a symposium with 100 planners from Hertfordshire in it back in November. And we launched a mentoring program there. So that's trying to have mentees and a mentor attached so they can help one another. They can talk through opportunities, challenges at key points in their career to really build that idea that you're not just here and this is a job, but actually at those key points where you think, I've been here X years, I'd like a new challenge, you can talk to someone. And I would say we might have to see it. It's a win if we can get someone in Hertfordshire and progress them through different jobs within the county council. But it might also be seen as a win if we can keep people in Hertfordshire. So inevitably they might start at one district and move to another. But if we can keep that experience within the county, we're working on the same challenges. Those sites come and go. Can we share those skills, those teams across in the sustainability team? We have a leads function, landscape, ecology, archaeology, and that is looking at how we sell those skills to districts so they don't need to appoint people themselves. We can acquire and share expertise as we need it. So I think what we're doing is putting ourselves in as strong a position as we can to attract and retain people and build their careers once they are here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know who Colin is, he's the Director of Growth and Place for Herts County Council. He obviously forgot to introduce himself, but I'm sure.
Apologies, Councillor. Yeah, so keen to give you an answer. I forgot to give you the basics.
I've done it for you, young man. Terry, does that answer your questions? And if not, do you wish to follow up? And is there any other member who wishes to question the officers and Stephen or Jonathan on that matter?
Yeah, it was a very full answer in relation to, shall I say, early recruitment and retaining training, etc. Working with the private sectors is always useful because it gives broad breadth to people within the industry. I'm a little bit concerned about keeping experienced officers, either in county or in the district, because I know that everybody works quite closely together. Is there anything specific around experience? And I mean experienced, higher level planners, place people that you're doing, or is it sort of, Patsy?
Got you, Patsy. Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Patsy Dell, Exec Director for Sustainable Growth. I mean, perhaps if I can use myself as an example, I've been at the County Council just over 4 years, and I've had 3 roles in that time. You know, the County Council is a place that offers opportunities to progress. So I've been the Growth Board Director. I used to do Colin's job, and I've had an opportunity to be an Exec Director. So for people wanting to advance their career, Hertfordshire has fantastic experience. We have got so much going on in the growth and place world, from new garden communities and towns, town centre regeneration, fantastic economic sectors. So if you're at a mid-career level, you want to progress, there are opportunities. I can speak to that myself, but there's fantastic experience to be gained in the actual work. And with a county council and 10 districts and boroughs, there is opportunity to move around, progress, achieve promotion beyond secondment. So I think, you know, we are trying to make the most of those opportunities and recognise that, give people reasons to continue their career at a senior level in this organisation and in this county.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Patsy. Jonathan, did you indicate you wanted to speak? Or?
Yeah, just briefly. I'm Jonathan Kay, Deputy Cabinet Member for Growth, Infrastructure and Planning. And I remember chairing one of these integrated panel groups a few years ago for resources and performance. And the subject then of planners came up, and the problems of attracting planners and holding on to planners. And I think that's been a problem for a number of years now, partly because we are very close to London, which perhaps, you know, doesn't help, or it gives more opportunity for career progression for various staff members. But at that time, there was very little discussion between the county and the districts and the boroughs, whereas now I think there is much more, certainly within this department, much more of a regular connection where this will help us, and hopefully it will help the district and boroughs too. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I couldn't turn my mic on. Right, Terry. We've had the best part of 10 minutes on that particular question, which is really maximum I can allow. So, are you happy then? Good. Right. In which case, can we please move on to economic growth? Alistair Ward-Booth, I think, is the nominated lead questioner on that. Alistair.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Councillor Alice Ward-Booth, representing the Bishop Stortford West Division. I've got a question about economic growth. 2 key priorities listed on page 170 are to work with the Herts LEP to support a strong economy and work with Visit Herts to support a strong visitor economy, and a net budget for 23-24 of £331,000 has been allocated for the LEP and Visit Herts. So I'd just like to ask, firstly, what is the LEP delivering, and what steps are being taken to ensure that they are using these funds effectively?
Thank you, Alistair. Nice office you have there. I wish I had an office like that. So £250,000 for the LEP and £50,000 for Visit Herts. The The LEP board includes Hertfordshire County Council and district councillors. The leader that's the leader of Herts County Council, Richard, is on the LEP board, and there are 3 leaders from the local authorities also on the board, as well as the executive director. Regular meetings between the parties, including the Herts County Council CEO, the 151 officer, and the LEP officers. So we have a big involvement in the LEP. Patsy probably knows more about this than anybody else, so perhaps you'd like to say a bit more on that.
Thank you, Stephen. We are, I think, very closely aligned with the work of the LEP. The economy is clearly, a corporate priority as part of delivering sustainable growth. We're in the county of opportunity, so we're also very lucky that the LEP has a coterminous boundary with Hertfordshire and the 10 districts and boroughs, which enables us to work effectively on what you might call a kind of a single vision for the leadership and support for the economy and place leadership in Hertfordshire. And we've done a lot of work through the Growth Board and through the work of the County Council to make sure we're aligned with the work programme and the priorities that the LEP is pursuing. So, for example, supporting our key life sciences and creative arts and media sectors. We want to make sure that the work that the county does and the Growth Board and the district and boroughs on, for example, developing local plans or developing skills strategies or dealing with planning applications, to make sure we're aligned in supporting our successful economy now and in the future. So there is a lot of close working, a lot of thinking about how we achieve that alignment and help to support Hertfordshire continuing to be a net contributor to UK PLC that it is at the moment. I think Stephen's probably outlined in terms of governance and oversight, we have quite a few mechanisms in place. The County Council is the accountable body for the LEP's funding. And this year in particular, with UK shared prosperity funding being given out to the 10 districts and boroughs, they in turn have also procured quite a lot of support from the LEP in terms of skill support and the Growth Hub and services like that. So there's a real interrelationship between what the civic and political world in Hertfordshire is doing with the business world that the LEP is leading on. So I think we've got good alignment on that. Thank you.
Alistair?
Fantastic, thank you. And then if I have time, Mr. Chairman, a second question. How will the portfolio mitigate risks to the local economy, businesses and tourism from the effects of rising inflation and the residual issues arising from the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you. That's a good question, and of course difficult to answer in its entirety, because the rising inflation and residual issues from the COVID are quite serious for the country as a whole. Hopefully being brought under control now, but nevertheless, certainly for this year, will continue to pose a problem. But the LEP economic plan is creating new job opportunities. There are action plans and industry panels for bioscience and the film TV sectors, both of which are very strong in Hertfordshire and look as though they will continue to grow well. There's a skills and training strategy, enterprise and innovation strategy, and the LEP supports business formation and expansion. There is a lot going on to help the economy and the people of Hertfordshire. And Patsy, again, if you want to add anything to that.
No, just to agree. I think the alignment that we have with so thinking from an investor's perspective in Hertfordshire, when they look at Hertfordshire, they're going to see that we have the Growth Board, where the leaders of the 11 district, borough and county councils and the LEP are working together on the issues that we need to in Hertfordshire. They're going to see, obviously, the LEP, we've got a strong LEP with economic strategies, a Growth Hub and sport in those terms. I think they're going to see that alignment of civic, political and the business world in Hertfordshire to give them the confidence to invest in Hertfordshire as a place. That investment will help our clusters. It will bring new jobs. So I think we're definitely trying to join up the way that we're working and do the right things. And we had a strong economy with less of an impact in 2008 in the last recession. So we, as a place, have weathered previous economic shocks. I mean, not saying there isn't an impact, because clearly there is, but we were out of the 2008 economic shock faster in quite a number of other places. So we hope with our economy and everything that's in place, we'll see that resilience with this particular situation at the moment. I hope that's helpful.
Does that
Actually,
answer your question, Alistair?
It does, but I think the executive member is going to chip in with a little bit more.
I just wanted to say that Hertfordshire does have a very strong economy. And Patsy, you were telling me just the other day that we are one of the biggest net contributors to the Exchequer. Yes,
the annualised figure is something just over 40 billion a year as a net contribution to the UK economy. So one of the few places in the southeast and one of the most significant scale outside London for making that contribution. So very strong local economy.
Nice to hear, Patsy and Stephen, but one wonders what the net flow back into the county is, I suppose, disproportionately low compared to others under those circumstances. Any other members got any questions in respect of that particular economic growth?
Yes,
Ken.
Richard, it's Ken. You've given me the area of job creation, which is treading all over this last question. Would it be a good idea if I asked my question and talked about job creation, or the question that I've got in hand at this point?
Yeah, it segues nicely, and I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. So yeah, can we wrap up economic growth then and move to Ken Crofton, who will now tell you which area he represents, because he didn't before. And
you want me to carry on now?
Yes, please, Ken.
Right. Okay, apology. I'm Ken Crofton. I'm the County Councillor for Hertford Rural. So with that in mind, I've been asking, job creation is an area I'm looking at. And one thing, the war in Ukraine and the other problems with China and Russia with the energy have highlighted our exposure to material supplies from countries that can use their position as an economic lever, and perhaps even stronger than that. And they can turn the taps off at will and create huge disruption in our well-being and in this county. So what can we do to actually realise at a national level, but at a county level, the process? We need to be more self-sufficient, and it's essential that we do to have a more balanced economy, moving away from the service industry. Supporting the service industry, but adding to that sector with manufacturing. What can we do as a county to actually move away? We can't just build houses; it's impossible, because the housing economy has absolutely fallen off a cliff. New builders, they can't sell houses, and they're making redundancies. I know that firsthand. So what can we do to try and encourage a balanced economy that this nation needs to have?
Thank you. Colin, okay.
And happy for you to go first, Councillor, if you've got something.
Well, I was just going to say that is a difficult question again. And of course, the country as a whole has dropped hugely in the manufacturing sectors. We don't make nearly as much as we used to at one time. In coal and steel, and even things like gas production, and I know there are arguments for and against that, we've fallen well below where we should be. One area in which we can assist, of course, is that we have a substantial rural economy in this county, and the county council is the owner of a substantial amount of acreage. And there is currently There are proposals on how the rural economy will be run, and that includes, of course, food production and carbon capture. And food production, local food production, I personally think is a very important aspect of any economy. We shouldn't be importing green beans from Kenya and everywhere else. Anyway, that's one thing. But Colin, you might want to add on to the jobs and some of the the job creations we've got, like the Hearts IQ and others.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, I think the first thing to say to that, I think we do have quite a balanced, resilient economy. As a county, we're not dependent on any one or two sectors. We have a breadth of jobs and services and industries. We have a number of people travelling to London every day, so there are jobs in the city as well as jobs in the county and around us. Through the Hearts LEP economic plan and their strategies, through local plans that districts prepare, there is an attempt to get a balance between population and housing growth and job growth. So we have some level of alignment between the types of workers, the numbers of workers, and the types of jobs. New land is identified for economic development, so there is a large amount of land at Hemel Hempstead in the Hearts IQ area coming forward for economic development. There is land at the north of Baldock coming forward. There are other sites in Broxbourne, for example. It's right, I would argue, that we're no longer producing raw materials that we once did, but we are now producing pharmaceutical drugs through the bioscience industry. We're creating a lot of culture that has, national, international value through the film industry and lots of other sectors. So I think the first point, as the director, you would look here and say, well, I'm not dealing with an area where I was reliant on one industry that has just died or gone abroad, and what am I going to bring in? It's more about nurturing the growth industries, identifying what the future industries might be, both those that are going to happen and those that we want to happen, because there are, high quality jobs available, there are sustainability benefits to it, and then seeking to assist by making the right land available, creating the right policies to support that, getting the right training going on in the schools, colleges, universities, so there are people trained to enter those professions there afterwards. And I think that is all happening as much as we're able to locally through county, districts, LEP and other partners.
And I think part of that, Colin, is that if just give one small example, if you get a packet of aspirin or something and look at the back, it'll say made in Portugal or made in France or whatever. The pharmaceutical industries, which are increasing in our county, would enable, through research and manufacture, such things to be made in the UK. And I think that's important. It's part of making things locally rather than importing all the time. There are some things, again, that we cannot make locally. We don't have steel production in Hertfordshire. We tend to be light, high-tech industry rather than heavy industry, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
I've got Steve Jarvis. Are you? Does that answer your question? I see it broadened the aspect from the specific about Hemel Hempstead Garden Community to a wider discourse upon Hertfordshire in general, which is useful. Ken, have you got anything else to add before I bring Steve in, please?
Well, I think we're all probably encouraged. We all know how strong the economy is in Hertfordshire. I just urge everybody to go down the balanced, encourage everything for a balanced economic county, and it's encouraging to see what we are doing, but we need to do more.
Thank you very much, Steve.
I guess what interests me is we've got a target in terms of numbers of jobs delivered, and Colin has talked a bit about the type of jobs, but it seems to me that historically that's been Hertfordshire's challenge, has not been finding some employment for everybody. It's been that productivity in the county has not increased in the way it has in some other locations, and ensuring that we get the right sort of jobs that provide a lot of added value. And you've talked a bit about some of the ways of doing that. And personally, I'm not sure that making paracetamol tablets in the Hertfordshire is the way to do that. I think we might probably get more benefit out of developing the new drugs here and actually putting them in boxes somewhere else. But that's another matter. What are we doing to make sure that our objectives, that our actions are meeting those objectives rather than just the numbers? And how are we measuring that? How do we know if we're succeeding? I think you've answered the first part of that. I think it's really the second part. How do we know if we're succeeding? That's the question I'm asking.
I suppose we would know if we're succeeding by the net contribution that Hertfordshire makes to the Exchequer. I think, Patsy, did you say £40 billion? You know, if in 10 years it became £55 billion, we would know that we were succeeding. Productivity is a difficulty nationally. In Hertfordshire, we have very low unemployment. We have more employment in Hertfordshire than we've ever had. And that's probably true of the country as a whole. It doesn't necessarily mean that our productivity is the best it's ever been. And so it is a challenge for the county as well as the country. But I think the ultimate measure will be the contribution to the Exchequer.
Patsy, if you can be fairly quick, because I've gone off piste here and let these two segue together. But of course, in terms of time, I've got some high priority issues that other members want to ask. So can we?
Of course. Sorry, Rich. Just to add to what we're saying, clearly the LEP will be monitoring things like business startups. So where we can get the information on job creation, and we know these new sectors, all the new film studios that are coming, all the growth that's happening at Stevenage. We'll be monitoring the link with our higher and further education providers in Hertfordshire and trying to make sure that we are capturing high quality jobs for local people and moving people into those sectors, perhaps from, say, hospitality, where things are not as strong. We know that. So there will be monitoring as well as the big local economy figure going on to see how we're progressing on that jobs ambition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I bring that one to a close unless there's any pressing questions then, and move on to the Harlow-Gilston situation. Steve Wortley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my question is Councillor Steve Wortley, the County Councillor for Cheshunt Central. As you rightly said, my question is regarding Harlow-Gilston Garden Town project. The infrastructure to support the delivery of the project will receive 146 million over a 4-year period. I would like to know what are the risks associated with the Harlow-Gilston Town project and how are they being managed? Also, what guarantees are there that this is a realistic amount of money for the lifespan of the project? I do have a second question as well, Mr. Chairman, if I can. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's 171 million funding from Homes England in the HIG contract and revenue capacity funding. How to make sure it is properly expended and how to make sure that the development goes ahead as expected is quite a complex question. There is a joint committee business plan work programme that is ongoing at the moment. There's management of the HIG contract, and this county is working closely with Homes England. This county is also working closely with Essex County Council, with the people from Harlow and Places for People, who are delivering some of the housing, hope to be. And HIG delivers the infrastructure, which will enable 10,000 houses to be built. Now, having said all that, the process and progress of this development will depend on a number of things. It will depend on planning being awarded within the next month or so from East Herts Council. And we have an input into what goes into the planning documents, but we will not have the final decision on that. That will be up to the local planning authority. And as with all developments of this size, there will be people who are against it and there will be people who are in favour of it. And we hope many more will be in favour of it. You may know that a judicial review was put in for the bridges, and it is likely that there will be some serious opposition to the planning, assuming that goes through in the next month. So planning is never a cast iron process. We are at second hand to the planning process. We have our input into that, but we are not the final decision makers. So we're doing everything we can to assist the local planning authority to be able to put through a successful application, and that's probably as far as we can do without being the actual authority who will give the permission. Well, Colin, you'll know more about that.
I think that's a very fair judgment, Councillor. We've got a contract with Homes England. We have access to money. The point of spending that is to early deliver infrastructure that then supports the housing development. By us, Essex, the developer, having access to that funding, it means that hopefully more money can go into other things such as affordable housing. And then the intent is that money then becomes available as a rolling infrastructure fund to help support the wider regeneration of the area. And there's a whole series of processes in place to make sure we're abiding by the terms of the contract. We're keeping members informed through that process. We're working closely with partners through partnership working and hoping to create a joint committee for the Harlow-Gilston project that ensures that we're abiding by all the terms that we've signed up to.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing the question. Councillor Bolton, I just want to, I mean, you touched on something there, but I just want to push you a little bit further on it, if I may. Given that much of the project is in Essex, but with 3,600 of these 16,000 new homes are going to be delivered in East Herts district from 2020 to 23, how can we actually be, because we obviously represent residents of Hertfordshire here, how can we be sure that we're maximising the benefit for Hertfordshire residents? So if you could just expand, I know you alluded to it, but if you could just really sort of drill down a little bit further for me on that point.
Yeah, sure. It is a good point, and Harlow is in Essex and is right on the border with us. There are infrastructure questions which arise from that, not least traffic. And the people of Hertfordshire will be affected by traffic, but they will gain housing from it as well. I think also it's fair to say that we are not putting a huge amount of money into this. The HIG money is throughput money. It's not coming from this council. That's not to say that because we're not putting a lot into it, we don't want a lot out of it, because we would like to maximise what we do, what we get for our residents. One of the things is quality of housing, because it's important in all the housing in the county. We want to maximise the quality for people. If we possibly can, and this is being looked at the moment, as is affordable housing. I think there's a question on affordable housing later, but affordable housing will be provided at I think 20, 22, 23%, that sort of order. So our involvement in the planning process to date and being part of the joint committee enables us to push for the wishes of the Hertfordshire county and Hertfordshire people. So we do have an input in maximising what we can. So I think we're on to that.
That's great. That's great to hear, Councillor Bolton. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. In view of our time pressures, I'm happy with that answer. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Now, again, I did say that we would try and stick to a prioritised order, but again, it's segued nicely into the affordable homes situation, and I'm not sure if Sharon Taylor is on the list, but if not, may I come in here and exercise the chairman's prerogative and go out of order again? And my understanding of the situation in respect of affordable homes is that, rightly or wrongly, sadly, in my humble opinion, the local planning authorities are the arbiters of what the percentage shall be under normal circumstances by virtue of the content of their local plans, and it's not a nationally set figure, although there are targets. Can I just ask then, the key metric for the portfolio is to review the service outcomes as listed, and the number one new market in affordable homes built per year. How do you define affordable? And will this definition change amidst the cost of living crisis? And additionally, how many affordable homes are built per year in the county? And is, in your opinion, this sufficient to meet the demands of that segment of the marketplace?
Okay, thank you, Richard. That's another very good question, which exercises the planning authorities and this county. But let me read out the definition, because there is a technical definition from the Department of Levelling Up. And it says affordable housing, which can be for either rent or sale, is for those whose needs are not met by market. It includes different tenures, including social rent, affordable rent, and shared ownership, among others. It can be new build or private sector property that has been purchased for use as affordable homes. So that's the definition. The local authorities, the planning authorities in Hertfordshire generally seek 30 to 40% in their local plans as affordable. That is not always met. And as you have just said, in difficult economic times where the house price is perhaps not as good as it was, but almost contrarily, building costs continue to rise. The profit which developers make becomes reduced, and there is always a viability calculation on developments which will lead you to a final figure. Developers always say they're not making any profit, of course, and they want less in the way of affordable homes, fewer affordable homes than we would want. But 30 to 40% is what the local planning authorities are requiring in the borough, in the county, and it does vary from borough to district in a small way. And I think we have something like 25% affordable housing that has been built recently overall. Is that right, Colin, that figure?
The figure we had from last year was 28% based upon gross new houses built in the county over the year. So when you look at most districts seek targets of 30-40% to larger sites, you accept that some smaller sites come forward without affordable housing. That feels like a decent result based upon policy. In some cases, districts have built affordable housing themselves and have delivered a larger number in their local areas. But I think in terms of what the planning system allows, the fact that developers are allowed to submit viability assessments, it's probably as good as we can hope with the planning system as it's written at the moment. There would be arguments that more is needed, but we have to get that working with market housing to deliver it in most cases at scale.
John Hale. Sorry, Steve, do you want to come in, Steve? And then
I'll just quickly say, it always annoys me, particularly when developers are building on a greenfield site with no problems in the ground and with infrastructure provided by others, that they always say they can't reach the target of the 30 to 40%. It's different on a very difficult brownfield site, which has got contamination, demolition, all sorts of other problems. But on a fresh greenfield site, we should be sticking out for the 30 to 40% where we can. And certainly the local planning authorities are encouraged to do so.
John Hale.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I thought I heard earlier either Stephen or Colin said that the affordable housing target for the Harlow Gloucester was 22%, which seems very low if we're looking for 30-40% everywhere else. Or did I misunderstand what was said earlier?
No, you haven't, Councillor. The target in the East Herts local plan is 40%. The developer for the Gilston villages has submitted a viability appraisal setting out the costs of their development over a very long term, over a generational period. That's been tested very toughly by East Herts with other partners, and it looks like the planning application isn't going to committee till the 28th of February as things stand, so I can't say what the result will be, but it looks like a figure more in the order of 23% affordable housing is likely to be valid because of that viability evidence.
Okay. I'm conscious of time, people. John, unless you've got a follow-up question, my point to Stephen and his team would be clearly given the metric that you are asked to provide, we're not the affordable homes availability in this county is not being met. What mechanisms are open to the county council other than that of being trying to persuade? None, I suspect. But Patsy or Colin, can you just give us a thumbnail of what we can and what we are doing to try and resolve this problem?
Well, we have our own housing company, Hearts Living Limited. So we are developing homes within Hertfordshire. We're making contribution there. There's a choice. I think Stephen's already mentioned the land north of Baldock urban extension, that land the county owns, that's being brought forward with North Herts as the local planning authority. We'll be delivering affordable homes there, and we seek to deliver policy compliant developments. In fact, it'd be great for the county council to deliver exemplary developments in that situation, and obviously we'd always balance that against the viability. But you know, we are doing practical things to increase the number of homes that are available in Hertfordshire. So there's two examples.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm again conscious of time, so can we please move on? John Hale, your question, please.
Yeah, almost on the same track, but not surprising, seeing this is the growth panel that we're looking at, is the issue of the safeguarding and influencing the interests of Hertfordshire in relation. Oh, sorry, John Hale, County Councillor from Coney Heath and Marswick. Safeguarding and influence the interests of Hertfordshire in relation to growth pressures from London, the Oxford-Cambridgeshire ARC, UK Innovation Corridor and elsewhere. And I see that the Oxford-Cambridgeshire ARC got some regional planning, regional partnership criteria in the last few days. This development, how are we going to make sure that this is beneficial to Hertfordshire?
Thank you. Well, we do have an input into various bodies outside of the county, London, the airport at Luton, and so on. But Patsy, again, you'll be the expert on this. The Oxford Cambridge ARC is now sort of not disbanded, but it is more up to the local authorities rather than being a government not suggestion, but a government requirement, isn't it?
That's correct. If you went back 3 years ago, there was a government target for 1 million new homes across the ARC. They've moved away from that now, since with the levelling up agenda and a slight change in priority. So the grouping is a voluntary one between the authorities in that area, rather than being a specific policy instrument of government. But just on that, Stephen started to mention, I think, that, you know, our influencing role. So we're part of England's economic heartland. We're a member of the UK Innovation Corridor. Leader represents the council on the South East Strategic Leaders body, that is all the authorities in the kind of the home counties and London. So we have many opportunities where we seek to influence in the best interests of the county. We also have a number of people. Mark Kemp is, for example, exec director of Transport and Highways, is the president of ADEPT, which is the national organisation for the Association of Directors of Planning, Environment and Highways and Transport. And we use that influence to have direct access to policy, civil servants, politicians and national government. So we take these opportunities to try and influence in the interests, positive and to protect Hertfordshire across a range of bodies and activities and relationships. So I hope that helps. That's what we mean under that category.
What do you see as the particular risk to Hertfordshire from this, and by risk I mean both beneficial and adverse? You know, what are we trying to do?
So we are through you, Chair, if I may, we are trying to improve. So I talked earlier about that position in the eyes of investors coming to Hertfordshire. So we want that understanding that we're open for business and we're a place where the politics, business and the civic work in our local government system are aligned and supportive to business. So there's something about the message we get out. and how the reputation we have at government levels and across the investment community. We're also looking at, for example, London has a big growth target itself. We want to understand what's the impact of that coming into Hertfordshire. Lots of people retire to Hertfordshire, so that has an impact on our adult social care services. So we need to understand that. That might be beneficial in some circumstances, in others it will put pressure. Our employment sites are under a lot of pressure for logistics activity, which is also about servicing London as well as the needs of Hertfordshire. But we do want to make sure we've got sufficient floor space for the high quality jobs and our growing sectors. So we always want to understand, you know, the positives and the negatives from the changes we're seeing around us and be able to try and influence them for our best interests. If that, hopefully that's a bit of a better example.
No, that's very helpful, Patsy. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other member got any issues in respect of that particular question that they want to investigate? No. In which case, can we then move on, please, to Steve Jarvis, revenue savings proposal. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Jarvis, and I'm the County Councillor for Royston West and Rural. So there is a proposal, a revenue saving proposal about charging for monitoring of Section 106 agreements, but I can't find any corresponding entries in the key budget movements. Is that because it's not actually a key budget movement? It doesn't raise very much money, or is it hidden inside another item? So I guess the first question is how much income is it anticipated to generate from this?
Right, that's one I'll pass straight to Colin.
Thank you. Yes, we enter into Section 106 obligations with developers. We have a developer contributions guide to calculate how much we need for county services. There are a variety of planning rules to do that. We also charge for the drafting of those Section 106s at cost value for the legal element of it. The monitoring will depend very much on what it is. I can't say it's a percentage. It will depend on the application. On the case we're dealing with. So, for example, if it's, we're granting planning permission to a mineral site, then we will want to monitor the amount of material coming in, whether it accords with the planning permission, and set a monitoring fee. So I don't think there's an answer of it's a percentage or it's a number, but I can certainly, if it's helpful, Councillor, give you some examples of what we have charged and use those as the types of figures we might, depending on the type of development that the Section 106 is dealing with.
So maybe I've misunderstood this, but so we're going to set an obligation on someone who is granted planning permission to do some things that we require, and then we're going to charge them for checking that they have. I have to say, if I was a developer, I wouldn't find that an enormously attractive proposition. In that it doesn't include any sort of degree of independence, does it? We don't have an incentive to count accurately, do we?
We don't, or the developer doesn't.
Well, we don't, So, I mean, does this? I suppose the question is, does this just relate to minerals and waste, or does it relate to contributions that developers might make towards education or highways or that kind of thing?
Yeah, the minerals one was an example, but for example, with Gilston application, 10,000 houses, we will want schools delivered at certain points along the way, and we will use number of homes built ready to be occupied as the metric. Okay. So after X thousand houses, we want a secondary school. So part of the monitoring will be working with the developer every year. Tell us how many houses you built, because at that trigger point, we would expect to see a secondary school ready to be opened. That then relates to enforcement. If you haven't done that, developer, that's when we might have to consider steps to make sure that the school is open in accordance with the number of homes to meet the needs of pupil yield. It's that sort of territory that this is about.
Okay. Right. I'm still not quite sure I understand the business model from the developer's point of view. Or are we saying that this is, I mean, clearly when we say that it costs a certain amount of money to build a school, so we ask the developer for a contribution, that clearly isn't just the cost of the construction. There are some overheads that are included in doing that, and it's quite reasonable that the developer should pay those overheads as well as the cost of the bricks and the concrete. Is this part of that? I mean, we don't. I guess my concern is that we've identified this as a revenue, actually, as an income generation proposal, but I suppose we don't seem to know how much it's going to raise, and I don't see how it's going to work.
Chair, could I just assist Colin? Sorry. Generally, I mean, this is really an administrative function that we are monitoring that these contributions come in. It's not unknown that people might forget that they should be paying, as Colin says, from time to time. We're dealing with tens of millions at the county because of the size of, and you'll have seen the regular reports that come from the growth and infrastructure team to the GRIP panel demonstrating how much money has come in through Section 106. So it's a monitoring exercise. We can only do a cost recovery level. It's not a fishing expedition for us to raise huge amounts of money, but it is important, and you'll know that there's a fixed period within which we can take a Section 106 contribution and use it. Otherwise, we have to pay it back. So it is a helpful exercise that we do monitor that these contributions are being used and that they're coming in at the right time. I guess calling it income when it's really cost recovery for an exercise of administration and monitoring, but that our budget process doesn't really recognise an income stream that comes in, is deployed to a particular activity. It doesn't really generate funding that we can put anywhere else. So, but that's how it's accounted for in budgetary terms.
Steve,
okay, I suppose I'd like to ask one more question.
I'm going to let you, but can I? I've got Ken also wants to come in, but I'm going to let you ask your other question. But can I just tease a little bit more along this line, by which I don't mean tease in the old-fashioned sense, but tease out. I mean, clearly 106 is a contribution to infrastructure deficit created by a proposed new development. We anticipate, and we have metrics for this, what additional burdens will be placed upon the infrastructure. It is not a mechanism, of course, as we all know, sadly, for recovering from historical deficit. It can only be allocated to the actual impact that a specific development makes, and therefore is somewhat prescriptive in general terms. But it is never to be forgotten, and I certainly do not forget, that essentially in the majority of cases it is not the county council that is actually the arbiter of what levels 106 contributions, and for that matter SIL contributions or anything else, comes in, because we ask for what we want, and it's the local planning authority who then negotiates with the developers, and again they plead this we can't afford it viability situation to try and offset their liabilities. So there are two issues here as far as I see it. The first is that this is a revenue savings proposal. In other words, basically speaking, we are looking not to be out of pocket for the act of ensuring that the 106 levels that are agreed on each development are actually obtained, and that they're held to the mark. But it is nothing to do at all with the capital element, which is a separate thing, which we will allocate to the schools that we get. So that I'm taking the view that the title revenue saving proposal only applies to the out of pocket revenue costs in terms of ensuring that we get the money when it's due. Am I wrong or am I right?
That's correct. It's covering the cost of monitoring and the administration of the Section 106 system.
Okay. So just my final point is just to clarify. So we are talking, I think Richard has probably covered a lot of it. So we are hoping to generate some income to cover the cost of what we are currently doing in terms of monitoring Section 106 contributions. And we are hoping to encourage developers to pay this as part of the Section 106 agreement. So it would actually be the local planning authority. But we don't know how much income that's going to generate. But I would suggest it might not be a lot.
Chair,
well, hopefully it matches the cost of actually doing it, because I think to make a profit from it would probably not be legal under the 106 rules.
Hope is a wonderful thing, Richard.
Well, okay, my understanding would be that the 106 rules would preclude us from making a profit from that exercise, because we'd have to hand it back to the developers, and that would be a cost in itself.
I'm not worried about us making a profit. I'm worried about us not actually generating. I mean, we don't seem to know how much we're going to generate, and I'm not surprised, but I think it's rather hard to. So I guess I'm a bit sceptical whether or not this is a real revenue saving proposal, because we can't quantify it.
I think if I just go back to, it's a cost covering initiative, but we have to describe it as income generation because of how our budget works. But it's cost recovery effectively.
I think that's a misnomer, typical accounting language.
Whatever we call it, we don't know how much it is.
Well, because we don't know how much the cost of the monitoring is, because if the developers play ball and actually come to us and say, dear County Council, we are now ready, we've built 5,000 houses here and we don't have to enforce, or we don't have to spend staff time investigating these things to make sure they're not swinging the lead, so to speak, then there won't be a cost. So I think what they're saying here, my understanding of what this is saying, at least what I'm gathering, is that in the past we have not identified the cost of this monitoring as being capable of being charged for, and we've borne it to the detriment of the ratepayers of Hertfordshire, because the impact has fallen on the revenue budget. We are not prepared to do that any longer. We are now saying our 106 demands or requests, if that is the right word, will include an element. If you don't perform and we have to enforce, then there's some money in there to do it, and if we don't spend it, I assume it goes back to the developer. So it's not, we ain't accruing anything, it's just identifying an area which we haven't collected before. Ken, can you come in please, Ken, and ask your question, and we'll see where we go. We seem to be all right on time, so I'm not panicking, but I don't know whether there's any more validity in going deeper into this, because they're unknowns, well, not known knowns or whatever.
You've done a good job covering my worries. I don't share Steve's concerns over that. My concerns are really whether we're charging enough, as you just said, Richard. There is one example. I just want to say that I don't think we need to time restrain our 106, because we do have £100,000 sitting in Walken's account from the Proggle Lane development, which has been targeted for one particular playground area, which has actually just been rebuilt at the cost of the parish council, and it can't be used for anything else. But there is a footpath that there's £100,000 in for that. Where it is not time restrained, I'm led to believe, by the Rights of Way team. So why are we time restraining these 106 agreements? Because they don't need to be, because it's obviously, there's one example here where it hasn't been. So we've got to be tougher and really stand our ground when district councils want to negotiate. Well, section 106 is down.
Okay, Ken, you make some good points, but I think that's off-piste as far as the piece of scrutiny is concerned. I think that's a legitimate point, and I think it's one that Herts County Council could well examine. Make a note of it, please, scrutiny officer. But I can't see that we're in a position to make more of that at this minute in time, because it's not part and parcel of what we're about on this one. But I do have concerns about I know in the days of Derek Ashley, in his latter days, a complete review of the county council's cost assessments against our various capital projects were made, especially with schools, and we began to ask for a substantial more amount of money than we had in the past, because it was very aged. I understand that went through a long consultation with the districts through the various mechanisms open to us, and leaders groups and chief executives and so on, and has broadly been accepted. But it's entirely up to the local planning authorities how robust they get, and the only way we can do is to try and influence, I believe. But I think I'm going to have to leave this one now. I think we've got as much out of it as we can in respect of the revenue savings proposal that was in the IP, and we're then straying into areas which is policy changes, which frankly ought to come down other routes, maybe a scrutiny topic group or something of that nature. But I'm going to move on, if I may. Ken, you've got your hand up still. Can you take it down, please? So I know we're not being historic here. Right. Can I move on then, Steve? Opportunities for sustainable growth, I think, is something that's close to your heart. I've heard you hold forth about that in the past. So perhaps you'd like to ask a question on it.
Thanks. I'll try to avoid holding forth about it this time. I mean, there's an opportunity identified about, well, a challenge identified about the opportunities to influence sustainable growth in the future. And that clearly has a fairly substantial potential impact on the council financially as well from other points of view. So what are you doing in order to make sure that you make the most of those opportunities? I guess the opportunities are largest, the earlier you try to exercise that sort of influence. So what are you doing to try and ensure that you have the right influence at the right time for the future sustainable growth opportunities, rather than the current ones that we've been talking about to date?
Yes, thank you for that. As you rightly say, the earlier you get in the planning process for sustainable growth, the better, because trying to sort it out later and retrofitting is not the way to go. It is difficult for county in as much as, again, it is local planning authorities who have the final say on the planning applications, but we should be leading on certainly on the developments where we are involved ourselves, the housing which we are undertaking ourselves, any opportunity where we have with schools, but also on, for example, we are talking about having a sustainable guide for developers so that they know the requirements that will have to be built in Hertfordshire. So there are all sorts of ways we can influence, but getting in early is the most important thing. I think, Patsy, you'd agree with that, or Colin?
Definitely. I think that golden thread through clear development plan policy, setting standards and requirements, obviously that is then taken from government. That's the starting point in a plan-led system, and then making sure those requirements are taken through planning application stage. But all the other work that we see happening in Hertfordshire's response to the various climate emergencies that have been declared. So nearly all the councils declared a climate emergency or similar back in 2019, 2020. We've got a variety of working groups cross-county that are helping to support and deliver that ambition, make sure we're sharing expertise. So I think, there's a mixture of having a policy position so that we're picking things up through the development side of things, but also that we're leading, inspiring, using our own activity to, address our own decarbonisation requirement. So it's a multifaceted answer, I think, to how we should be addressing the delivery of sustainable growth.
And it is important that the local planning authorities need to step up to the mark here. For example, huge numbers of housing developments are still being built with gas boilers. Now, there may be reasons for that. It's cheap compared to the alternative. But if you're building houses with very high insulation values and very good window insulations, then you can start looking at heat pumps, because the cost of retrofitting heat pumps, as we know, is very expensive because you've got to insulate the houses as well. But in new housing, that's very much not the case. So it's the pressure that we can bring on local authorities to start putting in sustainable measures now before they're required by legislation, or indeed the building regs. The building regs is 3, 4, 5 years behind this, but we need, with our heart's quality charter, if you like, to get on and pushed forward with the local authorities, things that they should be doing now. I feel very strongly about this. I mean, we're quite good on sustainable drainage at the moment. As a county, sustainable travel is very important, and LTP5 pushes that even further. You know about the heart. That's one thing that we think is very important for the county, giving us the east-west travel. So the things we can do, but I would like to see more pressure on the local planning authorities as well to step up to the mark on this.
I guess if I just come back on the supplementary, I think many of the things that you've identified, Stephen, are clearly very important. But there are other portfolios, particularly highways and transport in terms of the sustainable transport facets of sustainable developments, but also education, because the location of stalls, not just the installation of stalls, but where you put them to have a significant impact on sustainability, and then resources in terms of the council's own development activities, where there's clearly an opportunity to do significantly better than some of the other commercial developers might do, but there'll be some pressure not to, because there will be a cost. So how are you working with those other portfolios to make sure that we do the best we can in terms of future sustainable development opportunities?
Yeah, I think we are working. Sorry, Colin.
I was just going to give a couple of examples, if that's all right, Councillor. So with the local transport plan, government guidance says we have to look at the carbon quantification of different policy options. So that will begin to test which are the best options from a carbon perspective, which then need to be aligned with all the other factors that would go into that. Our education colleagues accord with Department for Education guidance on school building. Through local planning, through the local transport plan, the amalgamation of those, we will hopefully begin to find the best places for development so that schools can be walked to by their pupils as much as possible. And our colleagues in other departments are doing a sustainable design guide, so they can look at how adult care facilities, libraries can be as sustainable as possible as well. So there's lots of activity in that regard, and we'll be pushing through lobbying government for policies that help to achieve that as well, and then get incorporated into district plans.
I think the other thing there, Colin, is that on schemes like Harlow and Hemel, we're pushing along with them for the designs that have everything in the neighbourhood. So you don't have to get in your car and drive a long way to your school. You don't have to drive to your shops, or if you've got a doctor's surgery. They're all local, and the neighbourhoods are being designed for walking and for cycling, with the minimum use of the car. And I think that where we can influence others in that's important too.
Can I make a general observation to everyone? I thought Steve's question was immensely valid, and I can understand the answers that you've given in terms of what we are trying to do and what we can do. But time surely is of the essence here. This growth agenda, even though many of these strategic sites are a 10 or even a 12-year, build out time, and assuming that the building industry decide to bring them in even in those at those levels, because there's once the site has got consent, there is nothing I think the local planning authority, or for that matter the county council, can do to alter that consent. And the conditions under which that consent is are being made are the situations that exist now. So developers clearly, especially for example the Gilston one, Harlow Gilston, coming in with an application for 10,000 dwellings, which ain't going to be built out until 2033 at the earliest, I would guess. And yet the infrastructure that they're going to be putting into those dwellings will be based on today's technology. There ain't going to be any heat pumps that the local planning authority can insist on unless they do it now. And if it isn't in their local plan in terms of a policy of thing, they haven't got the capacity, legal capacity. So, this work is absolutely urgent, and because the development industry will be looking to get those applications in as early as they can to avoid these on costs. Am I wrong?
to
No,
reassure on that, councillor, at the moment, building regulations have some elements of sustainability in, but I don't think many people would say they're particularly robust. That changes in 2025 when the regulations step up to be much more about sustainability. So probably not many houses going to be built at Gilston before 2025. By the time they start being built, they will have to accord with those new building regulations. And then if they change again in 2030, any houses built from then on will have to accord with those regulations.
Right. So my misunderstanding of the situation, which I believe you've corrected, is essentially, even though there is a planning consent, until that building is started, the building regulations have got to be current at the time that building is commenced.
Yes, they will trump the planning. The planning permission will set how many houses and where, but yes, they will have to accord with building regulations at the point they complete and seek a building regulation certificate.
That gives some comfort indeed, which I hadn't realised that. So there you are. Even after all of the years I've been at this game, I'm still learning, which is why these sessions are useful. Righto. Steve, have you got any further, or any other member got any further questions in respect of that particular item? In which case, no, you haven't. Okay. In which case, Terry Heritage, general contingency issues.
Thank you. That was very interesting, that last bit. Learned something new as well, Richards. That's really good. Thank you. Yeah, general contingency issues. Acknowledging that there is a substantial contingency budget for 23-24, what will it mean for the portfolio if this contingency budget of £10 million is exhausted within a few months, such as it was in 22-23?
Thank you. Just to start on that, I think it's right to say that the contingency budget will be considered by the Senior Management Board and will only be considered during the second half of the financial year when other options have been exhausted and the financial picture is clearer. I think in the light of inflation, the contingency has been increased to £10 million. It is, if you look at the last year, clearly could be a problem because we're never quite sure what inflation's doing. We're not going to be sure what happens to the war in Ukraine, and there's also the possibility of resurgence of COVID. So a contingency is necessary. £10 million is not very much money given the whole budget, but it is something. But it wouldn't be used lightly. Is that right, Patsy?
Just finding my microphone. Yeah, that's correct. There would be a very clear process before we got anywhere. You know, we are monitoring obviously our budgets month to month and quarter by quarter. So you'd be looking to head off, you know, the necessity to go back to the contingency as early as possible. And if that proved necessary by events outside of our control, then, you know, that there would be a kind of corporate overview of that. I know we've got Georgie Sheridan and Rachel Adler, finance colleagues here. I don't know if they wanted to add any.
Yes, please come in, Rachel. Good morning to you. I haven't said good morning to you.
No problem. Good morning. Hello, I'm Rachel Adler, Director of Business Support. I was only going to, I think you've covered the question quite well. I was only going to add that there's quite a bit of detail in Part A of the IP around that contingency, both in terms of obviously its size and assessing the size versus our reserves level and getting that balance, but also the process in which the council goes through, as Patsy mentions, for the monitoring. And how that need for kind of additional monitoring throughout 23-24 is going to be built in through, say, the Senior Management Board and monitoring of our budgets and kind of how they're progressing through the year because of the challenges we've seen this year. And it also notes in that Part A quite how the challenges escalated through the year and the approach that was taken. So I was just going to refer back to that. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Yep.
Now, you may not be able to answer this, Rachel, or any of your colleagues, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What in the name of goodness then happened in 22-23 to create a situation where the contingency budget, which was not unreasonable in that historic situation, was gone within a few months, just disappeared.
I cast my mind back to the start of the year, which I appreciate feels like a lifetime ago, but I suppose in terms financially, we set a balanced budget in the February, which actually came through Cabinet to be approved, and I suppose a number of world events happened which had a big impact on our spend, so namely inflation for one, and I suppose we saw that quite significantly across the highways and transport area and the environment area in terms of the inflation impact on our revenue budgets, but also across all portfolios. So whether that's in children's, in placements, or in adults. So we saw all portfolios having a massive impact on inflation on our budgets, and I suppose that was the first quarter we saw a lot of that coming through, which significantly increased the projections against their budgets and what they expected to spend, and that very quickly took them into an overspend position. I think the contingency for still in this year was 8 million. So the rate of inflation as it was tracking at the start of the year, and I suppose still continues to track, very quickly took those services into an overspend position. It very quickly, as you say, worked its way through that 8 million contingency.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lesson for the learning, and clearly as part of the audit and review the panel on this council, those matters were brought to our attention, but retrospectively, sadly, of course, because nobody had the controls on it. I am leading to the $64 million question here, of course, is, are we now satisfied that we are in a better place to control this budget and not to have to dig into the contingencies than we were then, because we had some bitter experiences, and if we haven't learnt from them, we jolly well ought to have done.
I would probably say, and again in part A, I suppose it showed the process that was gone through by the various departments, portfolios to one, monitor and report through those overspends as they were happening, and best estimates on the projections, but then also the actions taken to look as to what we would do about it. I showed quite a lot of learning, I suppose, in the year, and it be that we take forward, and then that work then fed into the budgets being put forward into this IP, and you'll see a number of areas have got inflation impacts factored into their budgets as pressures. So I suppose it's been quite a detailed process, one working through the 22-23 position and the expected overspends and the work that was required to then look to manage that, but then also how that fed into the 23-24 IP to factor in best estimates of how we saw the spend going forward. We haven't got a crystal ball, I would say, but I suppose a lot of that work helped to inform what's in this IP to, as you say, take forward that, have we got sufficient amounts going forward? And then, as we say, kind of that monitoring will continue, and we'll look to monitor those budgets in line with how external factors are impacting them.
I was muted. Thank you so much. I think that gives me great comfort, because I mean, clearly a budget is a budget and contingencies are in there to deal with contingencies, but it's a question really of how well equipped the council is to monitor these things and to control these budgets. Right, can we then move on, because we've got about 10 minutes left and we have one more subject which we've got to do, so somehow by an act of happenstance and your short, concise answers, we're on time. Planning reform. The IP makes mentions of the portfolio supporting sustainable, responsible growth and highlights changes to the planning system as a key revenue pressure, and surely it is. But how is this issue being addressed, and does the portfolio see benefits for sustainable growth from planning reform? And as a follow-up to that, bearing in mind that we are not in control of planning reform per se, what risks are there to the county council going forward when we don't know when these reforms are likely to be actually put into place?
Thank you, Richard. Wouldn't we all like to know when these reforms will be in place, because they've been talked about for a long time? As many of you will know, the government is consulting on the MPPF prospectus at the moment, and there are proposals to change the housing rules, buffer rules, greenbelt rules, supposedly to give local authorities more power in changing greenbelt boundaries and the requirement on housing numbers. It is possible that this will result in fewer houses for Hertfordshire. We don't quite know on that yet. It is possible that it will allow for increased planning fees, which is something that all local authorities have been pushing for a long time, because planning barely washes its face. The policies may give scope to increase sustainability targets, and there are various other things within the plan. So that's going on at the moment. There may be advantages to the new system in that the local authorities will get more control of what's happening. The Environment Act is requiring HCC to prepare local nature recovery strategy, which is important ongoing. And of course, the 10% biodiversity net gain. And as we've already said, the development quality charter is being produced at the moment. So planning change is coming. Not sure what it's going to be yet. It will have an effect on us. It may reduce growth in housing numbers to an extent. It may stop a certain amount of the green belt being developed. We're not sure about that yet, and we'll have to wait to the end of the consultation. But Colin, you probably want to say some more about that.
Sorry, fallen for the old microphone trick. Yeah, I think you covered that very well, Councillor Bolton. That, you know, we will have a debate at GRIP panel in a couple of weeks about the NPPF consultation and what we think about it as a county, what we think about it will mean for the county planning and growth of the area. The only other thing to mention is the government's also likely to consult on infrastructure funding and may bring in an infrastructure levy with rates to be set by district councils and then to be collected and retained by district councils. That would mean instead of the county council seeking and securing funding directly, we would have to seek that from district councils once they have collected it. So we will need to think carefully about that in terms of supporting education, libraries, highways, etc. So that might be a change for the planning system. So I think in summary, brings both opportunities. It still emphasises sustainable development as a core aspiration of the system, but some challenges we'll have to work through with colleagues and developers in terms of what changes it might be about housing targets, greenbelt rules, and lots of others we haven't summarised here, but will be debated at GRIP in a couple of weeks.
One of the issues that I hope you will be debating at GRIP is just the fact that once a local plan is in place, theoretically, the revised greenbelt boundaries or greenfield boundaries or development boundaries for that particular authority should be set in stone until the next plan review. But for example, my own local authority, North Herts District Council, has been instructed to carry out pretty much an instant review. I mean, by the end of 2023, the whole damn thing will be back in the melting pot again. Now, we all know that the extant plan will remain in force until such time as the new plan is bottomed out and gone through all the processes, of course, but it's highly unlikely that greenbelt, once lost to the planning local plans, is going to come back into greenbelt again. But one hopes that GRIP will, if they're making representations to government, will highlight these points and say that if it's good, you know, if it comes in, it could go out again, depending on what the demands are. But notwithstanding, that's me finished in terms of my queries. Is there any other member of this panel who wishes to ask any question in respect of any of the KLEOs that we've had, or any other matter of Stephen and his team? Because if not, it's 10:58. And guess what? We've actually achieved what we set out to do, conduct this scrutiny within the time frame. So if there's nothing else, may I please thank Stephen and John and Patsy and Colin and every other single member of the officer team for your presentation, and not least Rachel too. May I thank each of the panel members for participating and for your input on the matter. And I'm now going to call a break, and we will meet again at 11:20 if that's convenient. Thank you very much. This session is postponed or on hold. Thank you. Don't leave. Stephen, welcome
Hello.
back.
Chairman, we're now live again.
Thank you very much. Right. Good morning, everyone, again. Thank you. I'm now going to ask Artemis if she will kindly provide a summary of the morning session and any recommendations that she feels would be sensible coming from our discussions. And then we'll have a 25-minute capacity to debate those before we come to conclusions. Thank you very much. Artemis.
Good morning, everybody. So we've noted 3 recommendations coming out of your session this morning. First recommendation relating to, I'm old school and I use paper. First recommendation relating to recruitment. So working with the districts and boroughs to retain expertise across the county in the form of early work with schools, academies and the university, engagement at careers fairs to engage and recruit as a form of succession planning. And this feeds into the second recommendation, also on the topic of succession planning, in a different way though. This is in the job creation sector and looking at the breadth of industries in Hertfordshire, including ecology, archaeology, the creative sectors, pharmaceuticals, but also local food production. And this morning, members also heard about carbon capture as well. So working with the county, across the county with the districts and boroughs to retain this and develop this level of expertise. Members also heard about the reach of Hertfordshire's influence in various areas like the Hertfordshire Growth Hub, the LEP and ADEPT, with a reach as far as national government. There was a positive comment in terms of the learning from last year's budget. So this year, this means that inflation was incorporated as a factor in the budget, making this year's budget, this year's IP more resilient. And a third recommendation around the revenue savings proposals relating to section 106. So for the council to look at the fee charging structure to ensure that we benchmark with other similar, so other county councils or comparable in terms of fee generation size, so other comparable authorities, so that we are covering the costs of monitoring and administering the section 106 system. In terms of actions, developing a guide for developers around sustainable development as a way of future-proofing, and also working with the districts around the infrastructure levy to make sure that, again, across the county, we are working for the residents at all levels.
Thank you very much. There was also an issue on 106, which I think we bottomed out, but I'm just wondering whether or not we could use that for some form of future information note or something coming forward, so that members are aware that that particular issue hasn't just vanished into the ether. Other than that, members, have you got any comments, any debate, anything you wish to add or vary? Steve, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I guess you'd expect me to come back to the section 106 issue. I mean, I think what's suggested is fine. I think one of the issues from an IP point of view is that the IP says that it is identified. Well, it's not actually it's actually an expenditure saving rather than an income generation, isn't it? But we don't have that quantified at all. We don't. I accept that it may be generating some income to offset the cost of whatever we do, but presumably we have an estimate for what the cost would be. And I don't understand whether or not the county council is currently spending, £100,000 or £1 million on this. So, if we manage to recover the cost from the developers, how much will that be?
You're on mute.
Yeah. No, I know. I was tapping away like a good one, but it wasn't happening. I suppose it is unquantifiable. I agree with you. It's a strange use of language, but unfortunately, I'm not the arbiter of the language which our accountancy friends use. But Patsy, you clearly this is a matter of concern. It's been highlighted as a key line of inquiry. It's a new budget head, a revenue saving head, really. In terms, can you enlighten us and give some comfort to Steve and us, please?
Of course, absolutely. Because we don't always know what planning applications are coming in during the course of the year, there is an element of slight uncertainty. Will there be a Section 106? And then will that scheme be implemented within that year? But in the course of reporting, if Steve is happy, retrospectively, we'll clearly know what monitoring activity we've done, where we might have had to take enforcement action. So I don't see it should be a problem for us to capture what we've done over the course of year and report that as an income target. We can make an estimate looking forward, but it would be an estimate because some of the variables I've just mentioned. But there's no problem in accounting for what we've charged for the administration of the system.
Can I come back
at all?
Can I come back in, Patsy? Because I absolutely take Steve's point. Clearly, for officers to have identified this as a new strapline in our IP going forward, there must have been an expenditure caused to us last year from these developers' excesses. Can we have an information note, please, post this thing, telling us in broad terms, as far as you're able, what that was? And would we then be entitled to assume that if those excesses were again visited upon us, that we would be looking about the same sort of money? But I mean, I hear you. It's an unquantifiable saving, and we're meant to be doing a budget. But give us an information note. Let's put this one to bed, if I can, Steve, for the moment. Give us an information on what happened last year, and we'll take a view on it going forward. And certainly I expect audit and review will be looking very hard at the situation, especially given the fact that if we do put in charges which are not justified, the development industry will fight them and it'll be returnable because it's a 106 charge. John Hale, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of points on the commentary about inflation, and sorry, I don't do shorthand, so I wasn't able to quite that. My feeling was the wording read something along the lines of no allowance had been made for inflation in prior year, and I don't think that's quite correct. I think it's the level of allowance that was made for inflation proved to be, needed to be looked at. And similarly, on the first comment about the recruitment issue, I think, Artemis, you used the word retain in the opening sentence for the first point, and I think it's recruit. I think we've got two issues here: is how do we recruit more people, and then how do we avoid losing them all after 3 to 5 years when they're just beginning to repay our investment in them, and they go off to some developer who gets a fully trained member of staff at no cost. But that's life.
Or a rival authority, of course.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, fine. Artemis, you picked that up. I think John's quite right in terms of the fact that last year's IP, shall we say, made an insufficient guesstimate of inflation, and what you're saying now is that this year's IP has looked at that situation because the reality struck home, and we are being more robust about it, and we should therefore be more resilient this year. Is that what members really understood we were targeting? I see no dissent, so can we perhaps just modify that to that extent? Anything else, members? Because clearly I think we've done a pretty good job. We're on time. We could even wind this session up a little bit early, unless there's any other issues. I'm content with the revised proposals. Artemis, can I just ask what mechanisms are now going to take place in terms of circulating those? Will that these recommendations go forward to the full committee on the 6th or whenever we are coming?
Yes, that's exactly right. They'll be formalised. I will circulate them to you, Chair, for final approval, but they will then go to the 6th of February for ratification by the OSC. Just to ensure.
Can I then ask if you'd be kind enough to circulate them to all members of this panel, including Sharon, and I will ask those members if there are any questions of minor corrections. I don't want to alter the recommendations because we collectively have reached them here, but if there are any minor corrections in terms of punctuation or clarity of understanding, please let me know and I'll liaise with Artemis. We can then ratify them and they'll go forward. Is that fair enough? Everyone happy with that? Right, in which case I don't see the point in us. Can I thank all of the county team, Stephanie and your group, Artemis and your group, everybody who's contributed, Carly and Eleanor and Joanne, and anybody else that I've forgotten. My apologies too, but people, thank you very much. I think we've done a decent job here, and I'm proud of what we've done, and I'll be happy to talk to it on the 6th, and let's hope we can go forward and have a robust IP. Can I just remind members that the next session is the environment session, which begins at 1 o'clock, 1300 hours, with a pre-meeting for members, which is not broadcast at 12:30. So if anybody has either an interest or is actually on that panel, don't forget that. In that case, good morning to you all at 11:31 according to my clock, and thank you for your time and your patience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.